Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Paridana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakan Vitamsha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Rindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswate Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, everyone. So thank you for accommodating this change in schedule today. We're in London today, so time zones forced us to adjust our schedule a little bit. So just want to check one thing here. Okay. Can everyone hear okay?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Okay, perfect. So last week, Rupa Goswami gave us in verse 7 this explanation for why spiritual life in the beginning stages sometimes is not so attractive, why we don't have taste. And Rupa Goswami gave the very brilliant example of one who is in jaundiced condition of life. That we have a disease, and that is our ignorance, this avidya. And the avidya is cured by taking to the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord, reading and understanding about the Supreme Lord. And just like someone who has jaundice, when someone has jaundice and they eat a sugar cube, it tastes very bitter. Though the sugar cube is sweet, it tastes bitter. And similarly, when someone with jaundice eats something that is bitter, and you taste it, it tastes very sweet. So like that, in our state of ignorance, forgetting our relationship with Krishna, all of the material attachments in the world, they taste very sweet, but actually they are bitter for us. They're not good for us. And that which is actually sweet, our spiritual life, initially sometimes tastes a little bit bitter, maybe a little bit difficult. And we know if one has jaundice, how do we overcome that? By continuing to eat the sugar cubes. Though it may taste initially a little bit bitter, the cure to our jaundice is to eat this sugar cubes. And so like this, Rupa Goswami is explaining to us that we should continue to take to the process of chanting the holy names of the Lord. And by doing so, we'll cure ourselves of our ignorance. We'll again remember our relationship with the Supreme Lord and regain this wonderful taste of chanting the holy names. And so this is the instruction we got last week. And we said that there's a two-part formula for having success in our spiritual life. And that two-part formula is, one, we must be very humble, remembering that we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. We have a very tiny, infinitesimal spark of a relationship with the Supreme Lord. And with His mercy and His grace, we can once again reawaken our relationship with Him. So we must have this humility. And second, intense desire. Nothing we accomplished in life, we did not accomplish without some strong desire. We did not graduate college without a strong desire to obtain that diploma, no matter how difficult it may be. The intensity of our desire will determine how far we'll go in our spiritual life. So if we can combine this strong desire to make progress and this humility, understanding that it is on the mercy of Krishna alone that can make this happen, then we can have great success. So that is last week's verse. So now we begin to discuss verse 8 of this Nectar of Instruction. And the verse says, the essence of all advice is that one should utilize one's full time, 24 hours a day, in nicely chanting and remembering the Lord's divine name, transcendental form, qualities, and eternal pastimes, thereby gradually engaging one's tongue and mind. In this way, one should reside in Vraja, Goloka Vrindavan Dham, and serve Krishna under the guidance of devotees. One should follow in the footsteps of the Lord's beloved devotees who are deeply attached to His devotional service. So in this verse 8, we're getting to the essence of all instructions. Rupa Goswami says that this is the essence of all advice. And this verse is describing our prayojana, which is, how do we act in our relationship with Krishna? Right? So this process to attain this pure love of God, this Krishna prema, it is accomplished with this essential instruction. This book is called the Nectar of Instruction. And this is the essence of all instructions. And it is to do what? To use all our time, 24 hours a day, in chanting and remembering the Lord's names, forms, pastimes, and qualities. And when one is actually constantly thinking about Krishna, then we know one has achieved this goal. Our progress in devotional life is not measured by how many years we have been practicing, how straight my tilak might be, how many verses one has memorized, how nice they can sing bhajans. That has nothing to do. The measure of our progress in spiritual life is how attached am I in this constantly chanting and remembering the pastimes, the forms, the qualities, and the names of the Lord. This is a measure of our progress in spiritual life. So, in this way, Rupa Goswami is guiding us that we should be 24 hours a day. And we should do so residing in Sri Vrindavan Dham, serving under the guidance of devotees. And this is the essence, remembering Krishna to achieve Krishna Prema, love of God. And so our reaction when we see this instruction, 24 hours a day, what do we think? It's impossible. It can never happen. Srila Prabhupada was on Japa Walk in 1975 in Los Angeles. And he said, Prabhupada said, impossible is a word found in the Fool's Dictionary. Impossible, yes, on our own endeavor, it is impossible to remember the Lord 24 hours a day. But by the mercy of Krishna and by the mercy of Guru, we can make the impossible possible. But we must establish this as our goal. 24 hours a day, how we can be constantly remembering the sweet names, forms, pastimes, and qualities of the Lord. That is what will bring us to this ultimate perfection of life. Nothing else. And this is why this is considered the essence of all instruction. So that is what we'll discuss today. How to do this. How to make this possible. So this essence of all Shastra is to always remember Krishna and never forget Him. In our Puranas we see Smartavya Satatam Vishnur Vishmartavya Najatati Sarva Veda initiated, dear sir, etayor eva kinkaraha. It says that all Vedic principles, all scriptural injunctions, they should be servants to these two principles. One, never forget Krishna. And two, always remember him. What that means is everything we do in bhakti, in our spiritual life, should bring us to this concept. Always remembering him and never forgetting him. And so to do so, Prabhupada comments in the beginning of the purport here, we must learn to train the mind, how to control the mind. Because as we know, when we are chanting, when we are reading, when we are seeing the Lord, our mind roams to so many places. It goes into 17 different directions. So how to bring it centered to the forms and names and pastimes of Krishna, that is what we have to understand. How to train the mind. Right? So the mind generally remains fixed on one thing. Right? What does the mind remain fixed on? Whatever we are attracted to. Things that I am attracted to, I have constant remembrance of. If I'm really excited about going on some great vacation, I don't even have to think about that destination. It just naturally comes. I want to be there. So whatever I'm attracted to, I'll remember. So how to always remember Krishna? We must somehow increase our attraction for Krishna. Our natural state, it is the only thing we are actually attracted to. But as we have swam in this material world, we have tried to taste attractions to so many other things. But none of it gives us the actual pleasure that remembering Krishna gives. So how to develop our attraction? Well, attraction begins with one thing, hearing. If somebody comes and tells me, Hawaii is beautiful, the beaches are amazing, the weather is great, the water is this and that. Just by hearing somebody describe Hawaii, I have some natural attraction, some inclination to go there. It becomes so intense that even if I have not even seen something of that, just by hearing it, I can't get it out of my mind. So like this, the first process in devotional service is Shravanam. Hearing. Because when we hear about Krishna, when we hear about his extraordinary qualities, his most sweet, unlimited pastimes, hear about his beautiful forms, his names, by hearing, our attraction will increase. And when we are attracted, what we'll do? We'll begin to speak about him. So Shravanam leads to Kirtanam. If I'm attracted to Hawaii, I'll start talking about it. Did you hear about this? Did you hear about that? But it starts with that hearing. So as I become attracted to something, I'll then start to chant it, right? So this process of hearing leads to chanting. And chanting leads to remembering. It doesn't come out of my mind. And so this cycle starts. The first with hearing. And by hearing, some attraction comes. And by hearing about the Supreme Lord, then we'll find something attractive. And from there, we'll begin to speak about the Lord. Chant his holy names. Chant about his pastimes. Right? And then we will remember. So Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Shmaranam. This comes from the 7th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj is explaining the 9 processes of devotional service. And when we remember, the more we remember, the more we want to hear. And the more we want to hear, then the more attraction, the more chanting, the more remembering, and that cycle continues. So this is how, by continuing to hear and chant and remember, soon the mind will become 100% fixed on this chanting process and on this remembering process of the Lord. So this essential instruction of constant chanting and remembering, it can happen very easily. And it starts with hearing. And reading Srila Prabhupada's books is a very important part of our hearing process. Because if we don't fix our mind on Krishna, our mind will wander to the ends of the universe, trying to find happiness in so many material things. But none of it will give us the satisfaction we want. So this is what Rupa Goswami is guiding us on. And what to meditate, what to hear about, what are the attractive aspects of Krishna? They are unlimited. But Rupa Goswami is saying we should hear about his various names, so many sweet names of Krishna. His form, his three-bending form, his blackish bluish hue, his beautiful cheeks, curly hair, peacock feather, flute. So many wonderful meditations we have on the beautiful form of the Lord. His qualities, how he is so sweet with his devotees, how he engages us in relationships. When we read about the pastimes of Krishna in Vrindavan, we become so ecstatic thinking how Krishna is playing with the cowherd boys, how he is enjoying with Mother Yashoda and Nanda Baba, how he is enjoying with the gopis, how he's enjoying with all the different residents of Vrindavan. These pastimes are so sweet. And when we hear about them, our attraction for them will increase. And our desire to also experience that same bliss will also begin to manifest. So this is the process of beginning to train the mind by hearing. And what is the mind? If you go into Google, you'll get many, many definitions of what is the mind. But our Shastra has explained very clearly that the mind, it is a reservoir of desires. It stores so many desires. It is an unlimited database, terabytes after terabytes of ideas, experiences. And not just from this lifetime. The subtle body, the mind, intelligence, and false ego, they carry forward from this body to the next. We leave behind this material body. But the mind I have is the mind I've had for millions of lifetimes since I came from the spiritual world. And so that mind has so many desires. It carries these samskaras, or impressions. And where do these impressions come from? They come from the gateway of my senses. If I see something with my eyes, I see a billboard, what happens? A desire is imprinted in my mind. That is the goal of a billboard. They want us to see something and want that. They want to create a desire. If I hear something, I hear about Hawaii, a desire is made in the mind. If I smell something, so my senses, hearing, sight, smelling, taste, touch, they create desires in the mind. So they are the gateways, the entry point into all of these things. And so this mind becomes this storehouse of desires. And what is the importance of the mind? Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that the mind carries the soul to the next body. He says, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyajante kalevaram. 8th chapter. He says, whatever you think about at the time of death, that you achieve. And he says, if you think of me, antakalecha mameva, smara muktva kalevaram, ya prayati samadbhavam, yatti nastata samshayaha. He says, if you think of me at the time of death, then you'll achieve me. So this is the power of the mind. It determines where we go next. And this is why Rupa Goswami is advising us that we should bring the mind to constantly think of Krishna. And this is why it is the essential of all principles. So now how to make our mind filled with thoughts of Krishna? How to always think about him? So we talked about hearing, right? We talked about how that leads to attraction and then chanting. So we have to start to fix the mind on Krishna by remembering him. And by doing so, we remove all these other impressions. And this is this illustration on the right-hand side. You know, if you have a cup filled with water, if you want to get rid of the water, you have to dump it out. Pretend that cup is like our mind. And pretend that water is like some salty water. It looks very beautiful and bluish. But when you taste it, it is very salty. It looks attractive, but it is not. That is like all of our material desires. And so when I have this cup of water, I don't want to relinquish it. I know it's salty. I know it's not good for me, but I can't let it go. It sounds like all of our material attachments. So how do you get rid of it? So Krishna says, spiritual life is about adding Krishna to it, not subtracting anything. If I take that cup of water and I start to pour honey into that cup, by pouring honey into that cup, naturally the water starts to overflow. And that the honey starts to collect at the bottom. And as I start to pour more and more honey, what happens to the water? It slowly all dissipates. And I'm left with a cup full of pure honey. This is spiritual life. I have so many things in my mind that are not so nice, like salty water. But to get rid of them, to empty the mind is very difficult. The Buddhist philosophy of nirvana, trying to empty the mind of all thoughts, it doesn't work. So instead, what is the guidance? Instead, just add Krishna to our life. Just add spiritual activities. And by adding thoughts of Krishna, remembrance of his names and forms and pastimes and qualities, we are pushing out other desires. And what happens, the more I hear, the more I chant, the more impressions in the mind I'm making of Krishna. And thus, I will push out naturally all these other desires, so that I don't have to try so hard to purify of these desires. Just continue to enjoy the very sweet pastimes of the Lord, and this mind will become very cleansed. So this process is very, very simple. Just keep adding spiritual life to our day. And day by day, month by month, slowly, we can come to this point of constant remembrance. And so what is the best way to guarantee at the time of death that I'll remember Krishna? Well, if I'm thinking about the Supreme Lord, constantly chanting and remembering his pastimes, names, forms, and qualities, then it doesn't matter. Whenever death may come, no problem. Because I'm already immersed in swimming, thinking of the Lord. Right? So this process is that from today, tomorrow, and the next day, we endeavor to be fully immersed. Then there's no problem. No chances of us thinking of the dog or the neighbor or Hawaii and risk having the mind carry us to an undesired location. And that is why he is telling us this. And that is why we see 24 hours a day. 24 hours a day. Why? Because our time is so precious. Right? What better use of our time when we have tasted the sweetness of Krishna consciousness? Nothing else will actually even be palatable. Just like if you've tasted a hot, fluffy, cholesterol-free puri, you'll never desire a stale chapati. No, there's no taste because you have tasted something better, something more sweet. Right? So like that, this process of 24 hours is very, very important. And when does this process of remembering Krishna become natural? It's when we become free from our anarthas. When all the impurities of the heart have been removed, then we can become fixed. And from there, this taste, ruchi, will come. And when we have tasted the sweetness, we'll never want to stop relishing it. So to achieve this essence of all instructions, to be able to think of the Lord 24 hours a day, we must purify the heart so that this taste, this ruchi will come. Because when it does, then we'll very naturally be constantly remembering the Supreme Lord. So this happens by following the process of devotional service. How to free of our anarthas? We must practice our Vaidhi sadhana bhakti principles under the guidance of Guru and Shastra. All the injunctions are there. And if we do, then those anarthas will be removed. Right? So Now, the importance of protecting the mind. Borijan Prabhu gives this very beautiful example. You have this clay ball here. This clay ball is very soft. And if you make a line in it with anything that touches that ball, now to remove that mark and make it smooth again takes so much effort. He compares that to our mind. Whatever impressions are made in the mind, it becomes very difficult then to get it out. So we should be very, very careful. What impressions do we allow to enter into our mind? What are we allowing our eyes to see? What are we allowing our ears to hear? Our tongue to taste? Our body to touch? Because as we do, those impressions are being made. And these samskaras, they come up in desires over and over and over again. We're chanting the holy names of the Lord. And these random desires keep percolating into our thought process. They have come from these impressions within the mind. So we should be very careful to protect what we let enter into our consciousness. You know, we do it with our little children. We don't let them see a scary movie. We don't let them see some inappropriate materials. We don't let them hear things. Why? Because we want to protect the innocence of their mind so they don't become disturbed. But why don't we do that as adults? Our mind has so many of these desires, but we must protect it, like this clay ball. If you want to keep it soft and smooth, you don't let anything touch it. Like that. If we're really aspiring to make progress in our spiritual life, we should protect what we allow to make impressions in our minds. Because remember, whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we taste, touch, those impressions are made. And that is why we sometimes say, what is the harm? What is the harm of going to this party? Or what is the harm of watching this movie? Or what is the harm? Well, the harm is those impressions that we're making into our mind that then make it even more difficult to be constantly remembering the sweet Supreme Lord. And that is the consequence of allowing our senses to roam. So, when we understand that this is the key to our goal, then we can have some effort to protect this most precious mind of ours. So let us be thoughtful about where we let our senses roam, understanding that everything makes an impression. And once the impression is made, getting it out takes so much effort. The second part of this verse, Rupa Goswami speaks about bringing one's physical presence and mental presence to Sri Vrindavan Dham. This is the ideal place to be in constant remembrance of the Supreme Lord. And living in Vrindavan, it has 4 aspects to it. There are 4 aspects of this. The first is to reside in Vrindavan. But this is not just physically being in Vrindavan. You can physically be in Vrindavan, but if you're meditating on, the comforts of my life in America, that is not being in Vrindavan. But the other side is true. You may be physically somewhere else, but your thoughts and consciousness may be always thinking about the Supreme Lord in Sri Vrindavan Dham. And thus you are in Vrindavan. So it's not as much about where we are physically, but it is about our state of consciousness. Mentally living in Vrindavan is the key. Even if we are living in Detroit, Michigan, or London, or wherever we may be, where is our consciousness? That is just extraordinarily important. And what do we do when we are in Vrindavan? We engage in remembering Krishna. We engage in remembering and experiencing all the sweet pastimes of the Lord. So this is the process. We're not going just to eat rasgullas. We're going to remember and increase our attraction for the Supreme Lord. And how should we live in Vrindavan? Living under the guidance of our gurus and Shastra. Right? to understand how to practice this most wonderful service. Going to the forest and trying to become a Babaji is very, very dangerous in our impure state. But if we practice our spiritual life following our gurus, then we can understand how to make real progress. And we go to Vrindavan to render service. That is the life of all of the devotees. If we read in Krishna book, 10th canto Srimad Bhagavatam, everyone is 24/7 engaged in serving Krishna, giving him pleasure in all means. So when we go to Vrindavan, our mood is to go to Vrindavan and render service to Krishna. How I also can please Krishna. So that should be our mood. Not, again, just to enjoy rasgullas. No, but to actually give service. That is the consciousness. So residing in Vrindavan, again, means mentally, in our consciousness, thinking about Vrindavan Dham. And Vrindavan is just not in India. Our acharyas explain that wherever Krishna is the center of all activities, that is non-different than Vrindavan Dham. And the pure devotees of the Lord, when they travel, they're able to manifest these most holiest places wherever they go. Srila Prabhupada manifested Vrindavan Dham for all of us at our most wonderful Devasadan Mandir. Thus Kunja Bihari, the king of the Kunjas, is residing there. The pleasure goes to Sri Vrindavan Dham. Right here in Detroit, we have a chance to go whenever we want by the mercy of Srila Prabhupada. So this is the instruction that Rupa Goswami is giving. And why Vrindavan? And that brings us to this last part of the purport Srila Prabhupada speaks about. And this is very, very important. We'll speak about this more in Nectar of Devotion. But this mood of bhakti is not about mechanical process. It is about the heart. It is about spontaneous love. And in the beginning stages of our devotional life, we practice this Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. This is devotional service, engaging in the pure devotional service under the instruction of Guru and Shastra. Meaning the impetus for me to render service is because it is coming from instruction. I am not yet naturally inclined, but I know that Guru and Shastra have something of great wisdom that can bring about for me, something spectacular. And so I follow. So the impetus to follow is coming from the desire to follow the instructions. And Raghunaga Sadhana Bhakti, this is when bhakti comes, the same activities, chanting, reading, enjoying service of the Lord, same activities. But the impetus is now coming from a spontaneous internal desire. There is this natural inclination. One is immersed in remembering the Supreme Lord. And they are following in the footsteps of those who have perfected spontaneous love. And who has perfected the spontaneous love for Krishna? These are the Ragatmika devotees. Those residing in Vrindavan Dham. All of the devotees we see and we read about in Srimad Bhagavatam in 10th canto, they have perfected this spontaneous love in Dasya Rasa, in Vatsalya Rasa, in Sakhya Rasa, and Madhurya Rasa. This spontaneous love, it comes from this natural desire. I want to chant the holy names of the Lord, not because I've taken a vow to chant 16 rounds, so I'm going to chant them and then I'm done. No, but there's a spontaneous desire. There's a taste, an inclination, and a pleasure experience. And so our goal in Vaidhi Bhakti is to bring about this spontaneous attraction. And it's very, very important. We're going to speak a lot about this in our Nectar of Devotion study. Because otherwise, we can remain very mechanical in our practice of bhakti for lifetimes and not bring about this very wonderful spontaneous mood. So, in summary, Srila Rupa Goswami is guiding us that the essence of all instructions is to 24 hours a day be engaged in remembering and chanting the beautiful glories of the Lord's names, forms, pastimes, and qualities. And this will happen when we have some attraction. Because whatever we are attracted to, we naturally remember. If I have $1 billion in my bank account, do I have to try very hard to remember that I have $1 billion in my bank account? No. It will never leave my consciousness because I have so much attraction to that wealth. But the only real wealth we possess is our love for Krishna. And when we begin to taste that love for Krishna, then remembering becomes natural because there's a deep attraction. So it is by increasing our attraction that this remembering will happen. And how to increase our attraction? It starts with hearing this Shravanam. By hearing about the Lord, by hearing about His sweet pastimes, how He enjoys with His devotees, how He interacts, all His amazing qualities, then we can become attracted. And by attraction comes remembering, and then the mind is transformed. We fill the mind with all of the thoughts of Krishna. And by filling the mind with thoughts of Krishna, just like that salty water pouring over the edges, all the other desires in the mind will naturally go out. We don't have to open up the ear, some plug, and try to dump it out. It's not going to work. But by adding Krishna to our life, we can naturally purify all of our thoughts. And when we purify and begin and continue the chanting process, chanting the holy names of the Lord, then this taste will come, this ruchi. And once it comes, we'll never want to taste anything else again. And thus, what seems impossible, this 24 hours a day of remembering the Supreme Lord, is extraordinarily possible if we have intense desire for it and we follow the process that's outlined here by Srila Rupa Goswami. Then we have a chance. So this is the essential instruction of this book entitled The Nectar of Instruction. Constantly remember Krishna and never forget Him. This is all of our Shastra. They bring us to these two things. So everything we do in devotional life should be that. And we can measure our progress by thinking, how much am I remembering the Supreme Lord in my day-to-day activities? That is the measure of our progress. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnavinda ki. Any comments or questions, discussion?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhuji.
Prabhu, in that book, there is an example of, sorry, not in the book, in the audio lecture, there is this example of ink and cup.
Yes.
That's, maybe I didn't quite understand that properly.
Yes. It's another wonderful example. So the example is given, if you have a cup, and again, this cup is symbolic of the mind. And if the cup is filled completely to the top with water, filled 100% to the top with water, and if you take with a dropper some ink and you try to drop it on the top, it actually will slide off. The ink will not penetrate. But if there is one drop less than full in that cup, and you take that ink drop and you just put one drop, it'll dilute and contaminate the entire cup of water. And the example is given that if our mind is not fully immersed in remembering Krishna, if we leave some gap, there is a potential for some desire to then enter the mind and contaminate everything within. And so the importance of filling the mind completely with our Krishna consciousness is so important, because just one drop of ink can contaminate the whole mind. And that really answers the question, what's the harm? You know, we ask this question, what's the harm reading this newspaper? What's the harm watching this TV show? What's the harm watching this movie? This is the harm. Because those impressions in the mind, one, are so difficult to get out, and two, one impression can contaminate everything within the mind. Because that can turn into such an intense desire. And we see it all around us. Why are so many heinous crimes being fulfilled? Because one intense desire goes so uncontrolled, it overtakes all other sense of righteousness. So that is what was being illustrated by that very beautiful example of the cup and the ink. Thank you. I did not speak about that one, but I had a desire to speak about it, and you made it happen. Any other questions? Hare Krishna Mataji, yes?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji. Yeah, somehow I feel when we talk about this example of the ink and the cup and the water, it's kind of little bit depressing as compared to the other example of the honey and the salty water. There at least, one is very optimistic that, even if we are full of salty water and we are adding honey to it, so we are adding spirituality in life, slowly, the salty water will go off. And that's what we explain when we come into Krishna consciousness. That was the one which really catches the attention of many, including me. But when we talk about this example of ink and water, that really blows one off, at least me, saying that, that you cannot even afford to have any kind of scope for error at this point of time. Everything will go in a second, or any wrong action will create an impression, and whatever we have done cannot be undone.
Well, it's not that it cannot be undone, but it's very difficult to undo. So, but it's like this. What we put great value on, we protect with so much care and attention. We have a child, a young child. A young child, for its first 3 to 4 years, will not go a moment out of sight from mother. Why? Because there's so much love and care and concern for the safety of that child that mother will not let that child outside of sight 24/7 for years. It's not depressing when mother says, oh my God, now I have to protect this child because the slightest thing can... No, one does out of its love. Because one places great value in that relationship. So similarly, if we really value the gift we have, which is the opportunity to awaken our relationship with Krishna, if we really value it, then we'll protect it. Whatever we value, we protect. Why do we put seatbelts in the car? Because we value our lives, so we want to protect it. Why do we buy life insurance? Because we value it. But do we value our bhakti? If we do, then we should be very careful not to risk anything with it. Right? So it should not make us depressed to think it can all be vanished. It should inspire us to protect it. Understanding that a slight deviation, just like with a child, a slight deviation in attention to the child can lead to disastrous consequences. If you leave a child unattended near a swimming pool, or you leave, We have Ali. So what do? We make sure it doesn't happen. So like that, we don't have to be fearful of it, but we should be attentive to it to protect our bhakti so that we don't risk it becoming polluted. So the question becomes, as soon as I put this extraordinary value on it, I'll naturally protect it. But remember, Krishna says in 9th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, my devotee never perishes. If we make a mistake, there is an accidental deviation, what does he say? They're still my devotees, and they should be respected. So, yeah, no one's perfect. Remember, Krishna doesn't expect perfection. What does he expect and want? Effort. He wants effort. That's it. He has love for us. He's not a militant dictator. If you're not perfect, then forget you. No. Just like you are not with your daughter. You don't expect perfection. You expect effort. And that is what Krishna wants of us. Do we have some sincere desire? If we do, yes, deviations may happen. But we should be careful and thoughtful. So this example should increase our attention to being careful. But not bring it to the point of becoming, oh my God, this is hopeless. Because nothing is impossible with the mercy of Krishna and the mercy of Guru. It's okay?
Yeah, Guru. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Mataji. Nice questions. Anything else?
Oh.
Yes.
Prabhu, okay, so if we see the people whom we are speaking, like Sri Rupa Goswami and all the books that we are reading, the environment of life that they were having at that time is completely opposite of what we are having now, right? Maybe it's, I'm just thinking like, how, because the contamination, actually the contamination is more than the opportunity of cleansing in this current environment. So how to escape from this, or how, maybe I don't know if the question is right, but
yeah,
still.
How to escape from it is take the shelter of Gauranga Mahaprabhu. He came in Kali Yuga to make the impossible possible. He came to say, yeah, times are difficult, so with my mercy it can happen. So we take shelter of Gauranga Mahaprabhu and it'll happen. But don't think it was easier 500 years ago but not practical today. 500 years ago it was also difficult to control the mind. In the town of Navadvip, where Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared, people were fully attracted to material sense enjoyment. And Advaita Acharya could not even break that addiction and attraction. So much that he said, Krishna, you have to come yourself and do this. So there was great attachment to material enjoyment, even 500 years ago. So these principles are eternal. And they are relevant. And the mercy we have of Gauranga Mahaprabhu can make it happen. Right? So don't give us the get out of jail card and say, oh well, it's difficult now, so maybe 90% is okay. Maybe 80% is okay. Maybe, because no. It is not. Right?
Okay, thank you, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, and remember one thing. When we talk about 24 hours a day, we talk about time. Time is never the issue. I don't have time to chant my rounds. I don't have time to read. I don't have time to render. It's never time. It is always taste. If there is a taste for anything, we find a way to make it happen. It is not about time. It is about taste. We'll spend 3 hours watching a movie. even sacrificing my sleep. But I won't get up 15 minutes early to get 2 extra rounds chanted during Brahma Muhurta. It's not time. It's taste.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhuji, there is one question which is asked there. I'm slightly confused how to answer. That is the 4th question, which talks about what is the essence of all instructions regarding the developing of the devotional service. So, in that, do we talk about basically the following of the regulative principles, chanting and other things, hearing, chanting, basically Vedic Bhakti they are talking about? Prabhuji, what are they talking about?
Yeah.
Living in Vrindavan?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's the process to bring about this constant remembrance.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically following the regulative principles, remembering the name. So is it talking about how to remember, or should we just state that?
Well, yeah, it's first is what is the principle, which is to always remember and never forget. That is the fundamental principle. And that's accomplished by, this residing in Vrindavan Dham. Again, mentally as much as more important than physically. And following the Vaidhi Sadhana principles.
Sadhana.
Yeah. Because we have to purify the heart. When the heart becomes purified, then this taste, ruchi, comes. I said it's time, it's never time, it's taste. One taste will come. That's after anartha nivritti, after nishta, then ruchi comes. So how to get to ruchi stage? We must chant the holy names of the Lord. It is the most potent means. Cheto darpanam arjanam bhavamaha davagnir navapanam. This heart is miles and miles thick of dust accumulated. And we have to cleanse the heart by chanting the holy names of the Lord.
So when we talk about Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, so does it includes when we are practicing Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti, does that mean that after the process of initiation, we are basically chanting of the 16 rounds, following the regulative principles, or it can start any time? Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti can start any time as a beginner too?
Yeah. Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. There are 64 angas of Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti that are explained in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. We'll discuss them. But there are 64 exacting angas of this Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti. And so they include, taking initiation, rendering service to Guru, taking shelter of Guru. They include chanting, watering tulsi, circumambulating the deities, so many different aspects of it. And then there are, levels and gradations. There's the 5 most potent angas. So these are all different processes of devotional service. But what makes it Vaidhi Sadhana Bhakti is that the impetus to do it is not yet internal. I'm chanting 16 rounds, not because I just love to chant my rounds. No, because I made a vow to my spiritual master, but I know that that's the means to perfection of life. So it is a Vaidhi process of following. But when you go to Raganuga, you still chant your rounds, but you chant it with such enjoyment and bliss. It is not, I have to chant today because I'm promised. No, I get to chant today. I'm excited. I wake up and I get to go to Mangalarti and sing and dance with the Lord. Not, I made a vow I would go to Mangalarti once a week. Right? So that's Vaidhi. But we have to start somewhere. Right? If we try to be spontaneous and just do, sometimes people will say, well, why do you have to follow all these principles and these rules and regulations? I just want to do what's natural. Yeah, that is the goal of all of us. But if you try to be spontaneous with an impure heart, it will lead to impure results. You can only become spontaneous once the heart is cleansed. then you'll take yourself through this pure devotional service that will actually be pleasing to Krishna. Otherwise, I may spontaneously want to sing and dance with the Lord, but if my motives and my consciousness is not right, I will make mistakes. So the Vaidhi sadhana principles, what it does is it cleanses the heart. It purifies the consciousness. So then one can correctly follow this spontaneous mood of bhakti. So we should not rush to get there, but we should also not think that, bhakti is all about, following vows. No, the vows are meant to purify, to bring out this spontaneous mood. They're not the end. That's the means. And that is what Rupa Goswami is going to guide us. How to go from Vaidhi sadhana bhakti to Raganuga sadhana bhakti to Bhava bhakti to Prema bhakti. But if we don't understand these sequences, our practice of Vaidhi sadhana will not be fully fulfilled. And so he's going to tell us that the goal of Vaidhi sadhana is to bring out this spontaneous mood. So we'll talk a lot about this in Nectar Devotion.
Yeah, just a quick thing. So basically the Vaidhi sadhana bhakti, once we are practicing it, eventually it would lead to the anartha nivrati, and once the cleansing of the heart and mind takes place, anartha nivrati takes place, that's when Raguna bhakti would start, kind of thing.
Yes, we'll talk about exactly where it happens. But technically, we're not fully anartha nivriti until Bhava bhakti, so there's some nuances to that. But generally speaking, think of it in broad principles. Purify the heart to be able to spontaneously love Krishna. Because with my contaminated heart, I'll, like the Sahajyas, they want to, dance with the gopis and have lusty desires because they have no consciousness, right? So if we try to be spontaneous in that mood, we'll be nothing but rascals.
Thank you, Prabhuji, for this very wonderful explanation. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Anything else? Okay. So if not, we'll meet again next week. Next week's class also will be at a different time. I don't know yet what time, so I'll send out a note. It might be a little bit later. I'll still be overseas, so apologize for the inconvenience. But thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.